I don't give 5 stars easily, like at all, but when I do give a book 5 stars, it usually means that it did something really special for me. Hi friends, and welcome to my little bookish corner of the internet. Today I'm going to be sharing my 5-star reads from the past year and a half since I got back into reading as an adult. And something that I've realized about myself is that I'm pretty stingy with my ratings, especially 5 stars. Like, I can still give a book 4 or 4.5 stars easily, but when it's that 5-star category, I want to keep those for very, very special books for myself. My rating system isn't super technical at all. Of course, I care about good writing, a well-executed plot, and just overall a great book. But when it comes to 5 stars, it has a lot more to do with how the book actually made me feel and how it impacted me at that time in my life. With these books, I'm asking myself, how immersed was I in the story? How deeply did I connect to the characters? And did this book show me something new about the world or even challenge my thinking? And if a book can tick all of those boxes, it usually means that it gets a 5 stars from me. So I thought we could have a look at all of the 5-star books that really stuck with me over the recent years. And for those who noticed, yes, I did change my hair. Thank you for noticing. Let's start with the easiest 5 stars I've ever given a book. And that would be none other than Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. Crooked Kingdom is the sequel to Six of Crows, which is a YA fantasy series, and it's set in the Grishaverse, which is Leigh Bardugo's Shadow and Bone trilogy, that world. In Six of Crows, we follow an unlikely group of criminals as they basically pull off the heist of their lives, and they put everything on the line to get this crazy job done. And my friends, this was Leigh Bardugo's masterpiece in my opinion. Everything about this book felt top tier. The writing, the plot execution, and oh my gosh, the characters. I think this book and the series is so well known for the great found family and the amazing character dynamics, and I think really deep friendships that we find in here. By the end, I was so deeply connected to each and every one of our characters. We do get the point of view of every member of this group, and there are 6 different point of views. And that is a really special element that makes everything that happened in this book hit so much harder because you're actually experiencing it with every single member of the group. Apart from the really great character dynamics, we got an amazingly executed plot in this book. It was really out there, but nothing felt unbelievable. And I really appreciated that about the sequel in the series, because one of my critiques of Six of Crows is that the ending of the book felt a little bit far-fetched to me. And therefore I enjoyed this a lot more. I feel like Leigh Bardugo kind of fixed every problem that I had with Six of Crows. She either fixed or addressed in this book, and oh my gosh, she did such a great job of putting plot twists in there that really blew my mind. Just circling back to the relationships in the story, I absolutely loved how real unconditional love and sacrifice was at the core of every friendship. Like I said, it is a group of misfits and they don't really see eye to eye about everything. However, with their common goal and their decision just to be for each other, that resulted in such beautiful friendships. And I loved how friendships and not just romantic relationships were really explored in this story. As I said, this duology, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, comes after the initial Shadow and Bone trilogy, and I highly recommend you do read Shadow and Bone first. There's a lot of world building and character introductions that made these stories make a lot more sense and hit harder because we got some really amazing character appearances from the Shadow and Bone trilogy that were so exciting. They will have you jumping out of your seat. So yes, I really enjoyed this book, and if you like fast-paced, and I mean really fast-paced fantasy with great plots and great characters. I think you'll really like this duology as well. I, for one, am very excited to continue this Grishaverse series and finish it up with the King of Scars either duology or trilogy. These books are definitely popular for a reason. Next up, we have a book by an extremely popular author, and that is A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. This is a contemporary fiction, and it is a story about an extremely grumpy old man whose life gets interrupted by new neighbors that slowly start breaking down his walls. And what unfolds from there is such an incredible story about grief and love and the importance of community. I just recently finished this book, and I think my heart is still warmed from that reading experience. I loved the reminders in this book that there can be so much beneath the surface of any person, regardless of how rough and closed off their exterior may seem. This book showed me that just the right relationships, and honestly just love and kindness, can break through the wall of even the toughest person. This book deals with some pretty heavy and tragic topics. However, it was done in a way that there was this underlying theme of humor and hope. It didn't diminish at all the impact of the grief and the sadness, but it just did it in a way that left you feeling quite light and uplifted instead of heavy. You know those books that you read and you're like, ugh, you feel like you need to go for therapy. But this did it in such a hopeful way, and I absolutely loved that. I was left really thinking about the way that I show up in other people's lives and how important those little moments of kindness and love can really be for a person. And I honestly love that this book made me feel that way and think that way, and made me want to be a better person. So yes, this was just really beautiful. And if you enjoy deep, really character-driven stories that leaves you feeling very uplifted, I think you'd really enjoy this. This was a special one. The next 5-star read that I just love talking about is Wings of the Wind by Connilyn Cossette. This is a biblical fiction story that follows a young Canaanite woman, Alana, as she tries to survive in really uncertain times. This story is set in the time period when Israel was going into the Promised Land, and Alana finds herself living among the Israelites who are her enemies. As she learns to live among them, she also realizes that the God that they serve might be a lot different than the gods she's always known. This book surprised me in the absolute best way possible. I had no idea how much I needed this story in my life at that time. The themes in this story were so encouraging to me, and I found myself just so grateful, not just for the story, but for the reminders that it just gave me in that time. Somehow, this book just managed to lift my eyes off of my own situation at that time and made me stop and think, look at God, man. Look at what he's done. He has never failed his people, and I just felt smacked in the face with this reality of stop being like the Israelites, grumbling in the desert, and just trust God. So yeah, that was highly needed in that time of my life. Other than that extremely important life lesson, I also really love the characters and the romance in the story. It is, at its core, a biblical retelling romance. And it's one of those romances where the male love interest does such a good job of being patient and waiting for Alana to be ready to pursue this relationship, and I found that so beautiful. I just know this is a book that I'm going to be thinking of for a very long time, and thank you Connilyn Cossette for writing this book. I really needed to hear this story. So if you like biblical retellings that are faith-filled and really encouraging, but at the same time really engaging story-wise as well, not boring or weird or cringy, I promise, I would really recommend that you pick this one up. And now I finally get to yap about probably my favorite book that I've ever read, and that is The Sword of Kaigen by Wang. This epic story is set in a Japanese-inspired fantasy world, and it follows a mother and her son Mamoru living in a really strong warrior society where they are trained in a really cool elemental magic system. So one of the characters that we follow is Mamoru, and when everything that he believes about the world is challenged, he has to navigate his understanding of the world, his family, his identity, and just everything unfolds from there. This book was chef's kiss, brilliant, amazing, fantastic, all of the words that I can think of that are amazing. I don't think I've ever cried so much at a piece of content ever. Like, it's crazy. I had no more tears left to cry after this book. I'm actually finding it really hard to describe how this book made me feel. It's just that the world was so immersive and I completely lost myself in the story and in the characters. Something really special was that this magic system felt so nostalgic. You know, elemental magic will just forever be my favorite magic system. It is very Avatar: The Last Airbender-esque, and if you were heavily influenced by that series as a child, I think you'll really love this book. I have to be completely honest, and this is such a strange experience because I really think this is my favorite book so far that I've ever read. But initially I didn't give this a 5-star. I was so mad that the story ended. I was like, are you serious? Is this all we are getting? We're only getting a standalone in this world? And I was so upset that I was like, this book was so good, but it won't be a 5-star because how can this be the end? However, after a month of still like thinking deeply about these characters and this story, I realized that I love this book, I love this story, and this had to be bumped up to a 5-star. But M.L. Wang, please hear the cries of the people and decide to give us more in this world. I need more of the story. I need more of Misaki, and I need more of whatever's going to happen politically after that story ended. It is still a super good and honestly perfect book, but it would be more perfect if you give us more. Misaki, the mother, honestly has one of the most interesting character arcs that I've read in a very long time. She felt extremely real and raw. This character was not wrapped up in a perfect little bow. She is by no means a perfect mother, and I feel like it was such an interesting perspective to see an imperfect mother and her character growth hit so hard. Her story was incredible. I absolutely loved reading about her, and hence I want to read more about her. I will say this book does not hold back when it comes to the realness and the rawness of war. It is very intense, and if you are not comfortable reading about very realistic and, to be fair, gory war and action scenes, I would probably not recommend that you read this. I personally do not have a problem with reading gory, realistic war scenes. To me, it feels like it adds to the immersion of the story, and I mean, it's war. So I'm going to be much more in the story and feel like I'm there with the characters if you're giving me realistic scenes. I guess this is also why this book traumatized me so badly, but it was still so good. So there are all the reasons why this is one of the best books I've ever read. I don't think I'm doing it justice. Please just believe me and so many others that this is an incredible book. The worst part is that I don't even have a physical copy on my shelf. I have to import this book from the States. It's not even available to buy on Amazon or any of the local bookstores here in South Africa, which is so sad. I don't actually think it's traditionally published. I think it's still indie published. So I hope I one day get a physical copy to have that trophy on my shelf because I really love this book. But yes, before I continue yapping about this book for another hour, if you love epic fantasy, if you love elemental magic, if you like deep, well-written, layered characters, and if you are okay with heavier themes and graphic scenes, please pick this up. It is amazing. Speaking about epic stories that emotionally traumatized me, my next 5-star book and actually series that I have to share with you is the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. The Red Rising series is a dystopian sci-fi, and it's set in a future where society is divided into very strict classes. We follow Darrow, our main character, as he becomes aware of the harsh realities of this world. And we follow him as he sets on this journey of rebellion against the rulers of this world. And that is all I'm going to say, because you need to read this story without spoilers. You need to go into the series very blind. I promise you, it's the best way to do it. Where do I even begin with this series? Initially, Red Rising wasn't actually a 5 stars for me, but when I finished the series and I saw my rating that I gave this book, I'm like, what was this girl thinking? Of course this is a 5 stars. This is the origin of the story. This is where it all begins. This has to get a 5 stars. It may not be as strong as Golden Sun and Morning Star, but it laid such an amazing foundation for where the story was going. I mean, it had to be bumped up. Another reason why you need to go into this book blindly is because very early in this book, we get reveals and plot twists that are really great if you don't know what's coming. So please listen to me and go into this blindly. So yes, this book was an amazing first book of the series, but then we get this masterpiece, which is Golden Sun. My favorite book of all time is definitely tied between the Sword of Kaigen and then this beauty over here. In this book, we get an incredible plot, so well thought out, so well set up and executed. We get amazing characters, amazing character dynamics, new characters that are such an integral part of the story. The movement and the ending of this book, it was top tier. If you have read this book, I need to know if you have recovered from what happened, because I don't think I have, and I've already finished the last book in the first series, but man, this ending hit me hard. Finishing Golden Sun and going straight into Morning Star was such an impactful reading experience. It really made me reflect on life and reminded me of how much evil there probably is in the world that I just close my eyes to, and I was so grateful for my life finishing this book and seeing where our characters were. I was just made so aware of what happens when human beings try to chase glory and power and the absolute evil that is born from that situation. I remember sitting down the next day and just being so grateful for God, thinking how desperately this world needs Jesus. And not in a judgmental way at all, just in a very real sense of what happens when people are just left to their own brokenness. And honestly, I was just so grateful for the light that Jesus is in my life, because if I was Darrow, I would not have been able to recover from what happened in this situation. So thank you, Jesus, that I am not in this world. I will gladly read about it, but thank you. So like I said, I then immediately picked up Morning Star after finishing this. I don't know how anyone survived waiting for a year or 2 years or whatever after that book ended, but I'm happy that I got to pick this up immediately, and this was the perfect conclusion to this initial series. Emotional trauma, emotional damage, but in the best way possible, I promise. So impactful, so hard-hitting. What an epic story. Pierce Brown is such a genius. His plots are really, really good, guys. I don't think we talk enough about how brilliant of an author Pierce Brown is. I think when talking about the series, it kind of gets drowned out what a brilliant writer he is, because his plots are so good and the stories are so big. I think we neglect to talk about the brilliant writer that Pierce Brown is. Once again, like with the Sword of Kaigen, this is not a light read. This is pretty brutal, honestly. It has very realistic and in detail action scenes and descriptions of war. And once again, if that's not for you, then skip to the next series. Don't read this one. I will say a caveat for me when it comes to like gruesome, gory things, there needs to be a really clear distinction that is evil. Like the war, the violence, all of that is not glorified at all in these books. If anything, I think it's actually there to portray how evil and disastrous things like that are. I just have to take a moment to talk about the brilliant characters in this book. And I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but something I just want to say is that Darrow's perspective, I really appreciate him as a character. I feel like he is the perfect character to tell the story. I know there are secondary characters that are probably more favorite characters, and for me as well, but when I was thinking about this, I just thought how no one else would have been able to tell this story as well as Darrow. So I really appreciate him as a character for that reason. So yes, that was my experience with Red Rising. I have to say, you don't have to be a sci-fi connoisseur to enjoy this series. This was my first sci-fi read. It's really reminiscent of an epic fantasy, in my opinion, and I strongly believe that people that love epic fantasy will love the series. So pick it up, it is great. Then we have got to talk about the book that ruined all other romanticies for me, and that will be Bounty Hunter by Kaylee Jarvis. This is an indie published, no spice romantasy, and it follows Vera, a bounty hunter that is trying to make ends meet in this fantasy world where she has to hide her true identity. But one final bounty job finds Vera in a very tricky situation with a mysterious target that might be her greatest enemy. This book was such a fun mix. It had a really cool magic system, it had a very sweet and meaningful romance, and it had such funny moments that were so reminiscent of those early 2000 rom-com movies. You know, those movies that they don't make anymore? This book gave me everything that I wanted and that I miss about those movies. The death dress scene in this book had me laughing out loud. If you've read this book and you know, then you know. So yes, I think I loved this book because it was so incredibly fun, but I also love the characters. They have a very special place in my heart. And can we hear it for the morally good love interests that win and not just the shadow daddies? I loved this book for that. The pacing was slightly slow for me in the beginning, and if I'm honest, I did expect a little bit more from the ending, but due to the incredible vibes, the funny moments, and just what this book meant to me, it is definitely a 5-star in my books. So if you are looking for a really fun romantasy, almost like a fantasy rom-com, and something that is just genuinely enjoyable, I think you'd really like this book. And now, my friends, we are gonna end off this video by talking about Throne of Glass. This might be a bit of a hot take, but we have to talk about the rise and fall of this series in my life. This is your fair warning that there will be spoilers in the next section of this video, so please, I'm giving you ample time to click ahead, skip, go to the next section, spoiler alert. So this is for my Kale girlies, and if that is not you, then you can either stay to hear our side of the story, or you can skip ahead to the next section, but we are gonna talk about it. So like I said, this is about the rise and the fall of the series. So let's talk about the rise. I loved the first 2 books of Throne of Glass. Throne of Glass wasn't a full 5 stars for me, but I loved this world. I got so swept up and invested into the story so quickly. I was just convinced that this was going to be my favorite series of all time. And it is for a lot of people their favorite series of all time. At this time, I had just gotten back into reading and I was looking up like fantasy series to get into. And everyone and their mother and their sister and their auntie was recommending Throne of Glass. So of course I was excited, and Throne of Glass definitely did not disappoint. But then came Crown of Midnight, and to me, this was absolute brilliance. There was an epic story, a mystery, a cool magic system. There was great characters, character dynamics, and a beautiful romance. I loved, to my detriment, the romance in this story. I loved Selena and Kale together. I absolutely loved Kale, and I still do. He is still one of my favorite love interests of all time, the version of him that was in these two first books. I absolutely rooted for this guy. He was my favorite and I will die on that hill. But man, did Sarah J. Maas do him dirty. I mean, when this book ended, and apart from the crazy plot twist that happened, I mean, that was so amazing. I thought to myself, Sarah J. Maas is really smart. This reunion between Selena and Kale is going to be really great. They are going to go off on their separate ways. They're going to grow. They're going to develop as humans. And they are going to get back together and just be better for it. And then Heir of Fire happened. And I was like, where is this going? And then Queen of Shadows happened. And I was absolutely shattered. Guys, I couldn't do it. I ended up DNFing Queen of Shadows at the halfway mark. Sarah J. Maas absolutely ruined me. I have never even experienced a real breakup in real life. But I firmly believe that I experienced one when Kale and Selena did not end up together. The moment that I realized that this isn't happening, like they really broken up, I was so devastated. I had to put that book down. I was getting nightmares about this, guys. I was so invested in their love story. I mean, I haven't read an adult book in so long. I was so convinced that they were going to be together, and my little tiny reader heart just broke. And so yes, I couldn't continue, and that was the fall of Throne of Glass for me, because I don't know if you guys can see, but I have the entire box set sitting on my shelf, and maybe one day I'll want to get back to them. But honestly, when I see them, I get so mad. I get so mad at Sarah J. Maas for doing this to us Kale girlies. Guys, this is a very unpopular opinion. Like, I know a lot of people actually love the direction that it took, but for us Kale girlies, oh man, I couldn't get behind the direction of the story. And I'm so upset because I know that probably the rest of the story is going to be incredible, but every time I see Selena's face in my mind, I want to smack her. So I think I will let some time go by before I decide to maybe revisit that series. I kind of want to, but also I kind of just want to unhaul the books because they make me really mad. And please tell me there are other Kale girlies out there that feel my pain. So those were my 5-star reads from the past year and a half. Clearly, I don't give them out easily, but when I do, they really stick with me and they really mean something to me. These are all books that make me think and reflect and even grow at times. Not Throne of Glass, but the other ones. I would love to know what your 5-star reads were, and if you are a Kale girly, please comment. I need to know that you guys are out there and that it's not just me that's crazy. Thank you so much for being here and for sticking to the end. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. Until next time.